There's been some really cool updates to the Sony PlayStation 2 scene that I've wanted to cover pretty much for the last year or so, and we're going to be doing a couple of different episodes covering the PlayStation 2 over the coming months. But one of the biggest updates that I want to talk about today is something known as MMCE, and this functionality allows us to boot games directly from memory cards such as the MemCard Pro 2. Now, this particular memory card has been developed by 8-Bit Mods. Now, the MemCard Pro 2 is something that I've wanted to cover on the channel over the last few months myself, and I was able to pick one up myself. I bought it with my own money just a couple of weeks ago, and the good news is the MMCE support is now available for OPL and the MemCard Pro 2. So we're going to dive right into today's episode, show you the memory card functionality, how it boots into PlayStation 2 games from a memory card. A lot of people have questions about the functionality. Does it stutter with full motion videos? Is it even worth installing? How does it all run? Well, we're going to explain all that and more in today's episode, but a quick word first from today's sponsor. Today's episode is brought to you by Factor. Eating nutritious meals on a daily basis can be tough with a busy schedule, especially when it comes to shopping, preparing, and cleaning up afterwards. Factor takes the stress and time out of the equation with delicious, ready-to-eat meals that come together in just a few minutes. Choose between keto, calorie smart, chef's choice, vegan options, and more to be delivered right to your door, letting you skip the lines at the grocery store. And with a menu of over 60 add-ons every week, there's always something new to try. As a busy person balancing my full-time job and content creation, preparing meals can be challenging, but with Factor, I'm able to have a delicious meal ready in just a few minutes. And it also takes the guesswork about what I'm eating with all the ingredients and nutritional information clearly labeled on the back. So why not check it out for yourself? Head to factor75.com or click the link below and use code 50MVG to get 50% off plus free shipping on your first Factor box. That's code 50MVG at factor75.com to get 50% off plus free shipping on your first box. Once again, a big thank you to Factor for sponsoring today's episode. More recently, there's been new advancements in the PlayStation 2 scene with something known as MMCE, or Multi-Purpose Memory Card Emulation. Basically what this does, it allows you to mount the memory card itself as something that the OPL, or the Open PS2 Loader, which is a homebrew tool that allows you to boot PlayStation ISOs from either a hard drive or USB or over the network. You can now mount your memory card as a drive that OPL can actually see. So what this means is you can load up your full SD card full of PS2 ROMs and boot directly into them, just in the same way as you do from hard drive, USB, or over the network. So turning your memory card into sort of a optical drive emulator is something very interesting, and I think a lot of people are very excited about this. But it's also important to understand that this doesn't take away from the virtual memory card functionality of the MemCard Pro 2 it was designed for. So all of a sudden, this particular device is a all-in-one solution that manages your games, but it also manages the save data for those games. And with a maximum supported 2TB SD card storage, you can load up almost the entire archive of PS2 games on one specific device. That's pretty damn cool, right? Well, let's go ahead and test this out and see how it actually works. Now, I will say that there is a little bit of setup to do to get this thing up and running. The first thing that you need to do is update the firmware of the MemCard Pro 2 to the 1.3 or greater version. Now, this is my device here, and the one that I picked up already came with 1.30. But if you're not on 1.30, then you definitely want to update your device to 1.30, and you can do that pretty easily. I'll leave instructions on how to do that in the description below. Now, the next thing we need to do is get FreeMcBoot onto our MemCard Pro 2. Now, to do this, there is a virtual memory card file that I have already pre-installed with all this stuff. I'll leave a link to that in the description below. You can do a quick test of this just to boot up your PlayStation 2 with the MemCard Pro 2, and just make sure that it gets into FreeMcBoot and OPL is running. Now, I will say that there are versions of OPL out there that don't have support for the MemCard Pro 2, and this is because OPL is open source, and there is a particular fork with the MMCE editions that have been added to OPL to enable Memory Card Pro support. So this is something that you want to make sure you can't just use any kind of mainline version of OPL. You need to make sure that the one that you are using is coming with the MMCE enhancements. But keep in mind that the MMCE support on OPL is currently in a beta phase. So this is something that I would expect to be updated over time. So you want to make sure that you keep updating your OPL as you go. But the version that we've got here does work. Now, the next thing that we want to do is basically, if you are familiar with OPL and you know how to set that up, you want to go ahead and create your folders on the root of the SD card. So you want to create your CD folder and your DVD folder. And this is where you want to drop in your ISO files for your PlayStation 2 games. And remember, they do have to be ISO images. They can't be BinQ or any other format like that. It has to be a .iso image for the OPL to pick up these particular games. Now, one thing that I do want to be very clear on, and one of the biggest omissions I have, at least at this point, is that there is no support for PlayStation 1 games. So in other words, if you are wanting to boot PS1 games on your PS2 via OPL using MMCE, it's simply not available at this time. I'm not sure if it's something that will ever be developed. I'm not really familiar with the kind of the workings or what's going on with the development of this, but as it stands, there is no support for booting into PS1 games. And some people may be a little bit disappointed by that. But let's go ahead and move on. We can now basically take our SD card, put it back into our Memory Card Pro and boot into our PlayStation 2. Now, there are a couple of different tests here that I want to kind of run through with you guys, because I did test this on two separate PlayStation 2s. Initially, I started running it on my Fat PS2, and I also went over and tested it on a Slim PS2. Now, the reason why I did it on two separate PlayStation 2s is because there are differences when it comes to transfer speed. And this is something that I want to be very, very clear on when it comes to doing some testing. So initial tests here are very, very positive. I was able to boot into pretty much every game that I tried, and I tried about 10 to 12 different games, and these are ones that I would consider problematic games. Now, a lot of people have questions about a device like this, like the Memory Card Pro 2 or any other virtual memory card that has MMCE support, whether the memory card itself is fast enough from a transfer speed perspective if it's able to run full motion videos without stuttering. People may realize that OPL, if you are running it on USB or if you are running it over the network, there are situations where, especially when it comes to full motion videos, there's a lot of stuttering, there's a lot of hitching, there's a lot of slowdown, and it really can make the experience quite poor. And I am happy to report on a Fat model PS2, I didn't really get much in terms of stutter of full motion videos. Now, the first game that I tried was Final Fantasy X. Now, this is one game that is notorious for slowing down and stuttering on OPL if you are running it from USB. Now, on my Fat model PS2, you can see that this ran almost flawlessly. I didn't notice any issues here whatsoever with the full motion video scene here, as you can see. I also tested some other kind of what is known as problematic games, including the introduction to Gran Turismo 4, and even that ran just fine. So I think a lot of people will be very encouraged with what they're seeing here, because I think a lot of people just tend to write off something like this will just not work very good. And I tested a suite of different games that had full motion videos, and I gotta be honest with you guys, 99% of the time it ran exceptionally well. There was some slowdown and some stutter in Kingdom Hearts, the original Kingdom Hearts game, that does have some hitches and pauses, as you can see here. Now, unfortunately, it's very difficult for me just to kind of link an entire, video intro, because a lot of these games had licensed music back in the day for some reason. So I don't want to get copyright claimed or anything like that. But in my experience, testing the MMC functionality of the Memory Card Pro 2 on a Fat model PlayStation 2 is very, very good. And it actually surprised me about how much better I thought it would be. But the question is, why would you ever consider something like this over a SATA device and a 2 terabyte dedicated hard drive, for instance? loading games off hard drive is always going to be inherently faster than something like the MemCard Pro 2. And that's where things get a little more difficult to kind of recommend, because if you are someone that does have a fat model PS2, you're probably going down the path of a hard drive full of PS2 games. And that's probably the best way that you can experience that. So with that in mind, I did move over to the slim model PlayStation 2. And this particular model that I have here, this is one of my original models I've had for a very, very long time. And unfortunately, the results here weren't as good as what we saw on the fat model PS2. Some games loaded up just fine. Once again, I did notice that there was a couple of hitches here and there when it came to full motion videos, but I quickly realized problems started to set in when I started to test some of the kind of more problematic games. Testing the Kingdom Hearts game here on the PlayStation 2 Slim, you can see here that it's just skipping constantly. There's really nothing here that we can do to kind of, you know, alleviate this issue. I also tested the same scene in Final Fantasy X, and once again, it's just kind of stuttering constantly. Now, I'm not really familiar with the different revisions of the PlayStation 2 and how they differ as far as hardware, but there is a big difference between loading games from a fat model PS2 via memory card versus a slim model PS2 via memory card. And unfortunately, if you do have a slim model PS2, you're going to get yourself in a situation where you're going to get stutters on the full motion videos. And that's just the reality of the situation. Most of the games I tried, some of them worked fine with the FMVs, but a lot of them did not. And this is very difficult, you know, to kind of recommend something like this if you do own a slim model PS2. But if you do own a fat model PS2, then you can be rest assured that you're going to get a pretty good experience overall. Loading times are definitely slower on the MMC device here, but I wouldn't say it's anything that I would consider a deal breaker. If you take a look at this scene here, loading up the first scene in Silent Hill 2, for example, you can see that there is a little bit more of a delay loading into the first scene as compared to the hard drive, which is a lot faster, of course. But overall, the loading times isn't really a huge factor. I don't think it's a deal breaker in any scenario. There were a couple of compatibility issues that I also came across on the MMCE loader, and that was I couldn't run Jak 3 and I couldn't run Jak and Daxter, the Precursor's Legacy. Both of these games kind of got as far as the Dolby Surround screens, and they just kind of froze to a blank screen and they just basically crashed. And I had to just restart, you know, the PlayStation 2. So I'm not sure if this is an issue with the MMCE support or whether it's an issue with OPL or whether it's just the games that I had, the ISOs that I was using. I mean, these games do load fine on emulation, and I would expect them just to load on OPL. But I guess the takeaway here is that if you are expecting 100% compatibility with a device like this, you will be extremely disappointed by it. If you're talking to me about if this is a device that I can recommend to you, if you want to basically have a one-stop solution or an all-in-one solution that has all your games and all your save data on one device, look, it's pretty compelling when you look at it that way. And I do say that if you do have a fat model PS2 and you don't want to spend the money getting a SATA adapter and a hard drive, then something like this will work just fine for you. It's very, very cheap at about $50. And again, there are other solutions out there. There's open source solutions out there that do pretty much exactly the same thing. So for that and the price of a 512 gigabyte or a 1 terabyte SD card, you can basically spend $60, $70, maybe $80. You can get a really great solution that will manage just about a big percentage of your PlayStation 2 library without any issue. But if you are someone that has a slim model PlayStation 2 and you are looking at a device like this, that's where I have a little bit of pause recommending something like this. This is not entirely the right solution for you, especially if you're someone that wants to play games that has a lot of FMV sequences. And look, this is the PlayStation 2 era of games. FMVs were pretty much in every single game that was available at the time. So you are going to inevitably get into a situation where there are going to be some games that just stutter and pause and really just kind of take you out of the experience to the point where you just can't play the games. And that's what I found myself doing, you know, with a PS2 Slim. Look, convenience is a big factor, and I think a lot of, you know, people that watch this channel really want a device where you can just kind of plug it in and forget it and just enjoy it. This is almost there, but unfortunately, due to the limitations of the memory card transfer speeds, and especially if you do have a PlayStation 2 Slim, it's a kind of a hard sell for that. We're going to leave it here for today's episode, guys. I hope you enjoyed this. Look, this was a really fun one to make, and I am excited about MMCE support in OPL and in these virtual memory card managers that are available right now. But let me know what you guys think about this in the comments below. Do you have a MemCard Card Pro 2, and are you using the OPL loader for MMCE? Let me know your experiences with it. Maybe it's something you're having an entirely different experience over myself, but look, I was able to test a bunch of different games, and look, overall, it's a pretty good device. I wouldn't say it's a game changer in any way. I would consider it more another option in the tool bag of ways to play PlayStation 2 games in modern, 2025 on your PS2. And that's really cool as well. But thank you so much for watching. If you liked it, please don't forget to leave me a thumbs up, and we'll catch you guys in the next episode. Bye for now.